Hey, I am Chef Kyle Martin here at our French Mediterranean restaurant Café Violette in downtown Blowing Rock. This month we have a nice dish of a flat iron steak, and I'm going to show you how to prepare a pretty traditional uh, flavors of French Mediterranean cuisine. Some white beans, asparagus, olive and caper tapenade, some ricotta salata. It's a delicious dish for this time of the year. Some very nice, fresh spring flavors. First step, when you open up your box, the night before, you want to make sure to move your frozen flat iron steak into the fridge and get that thawed out. And your white beans are going to come to you dry. So soak those overnight in just plain water, about double the amount, and that'll get us started for the next step. With your flat iron and your beans, once they are thawed and soaked overnight, you want to drain that water off of the beans. And your first step is to get these going because they're going to take the longest. So drain all the water off, pop those into a pot with enough water to come to the top of the beans, and then about another inch more, and just give that a really healthy pinch of salt while they're cooking. And you might need to add a little salt later, but you want to salt earlier to really infuse that into the water and the beans while they simmer. One of my favorite ingredients here is bay leaf. We use it in almost everything. Pop a big bay leaf in there, or a couple if they're smaller. Start this on a simmer, and they will take about 45 minutes. And about half an hour in, you want to check them for doneness, and just so they're smooth all the way through. And so get those beans started, and then you want to take your flat iron, and for any meat that you're cooking, you want to salt early and let that salt really infuse into the meat. And it'll start that process of seasoning, kind of breaking that down a little bit. And I like to do a nice pinch of fresh ground black pepper as well. Flip that on the other side, make sure to season both sides. You want to salt this a little early and then let it hang out at room temperature while we work on our mise en place, which is all the prep work for the other vegetables that are in the box. So we have our beans and our steak going. The next is to get our vegetable prep done, as we call it in the kitchen, our mise en place. So it's pretty sure everything has its place to get set up before we start cooking. Everybody kind of has a trick of how to prepare it. You know, you have the woody ends here. Before you take a knife to the whole bunch of them, I would kind of flex it, and where it breaks naturally, that's where you want to cut. It'll get rid of that woody end, and you're not going to cut off too much. You're not going to lose too much of the good stuff. So you can get a handful, 2 or 3 at a time, and break off those woody ends and set that aside. For presentation, I like to keep the asparagus whole. Kind of gives you a little bit more drama on the plate. Can kind of get a little bit of height, move those things around, so whoever is doing the cooking can show off a little bit when you're plating. All right, next, it will save you a little bit of time when we go to eat and plate to go ahead and prepare some slices of this ricotta salata. If you've never had ricotta salata before, if you're holding it, you can kind of tell how firm it is. It's kind of crumbly, almost like a queso fresco that you might be more familiar with from Mexico. But it's just an extra salted and dried ricotta. So it's really smooth and creamy and crumbly. A favorite tool in the kitchen for cheese is just a standard vegetable peeler. That's going to get you some really nice, pretty slices. A pretty foolproof way to get nice, even slices of a cheese, especially something that's more crumbly like ricotta salata. You'll be able to get some really nice, pretty slices of that cheese. So go ahead and shave the whole thing, because I guarantee once you taste it, it will get eaten tonight. So next, we're gonna chop up some tapenade, which is a traditional French Mediterranean condiment. You may have had it. You can get them in jars, have them in all different aisles of the supermarket and restaurants. What we do here at Café Violette is super traditional, really simple version from Nice, which is where the condiment originated from. So we have here the Nicoise olives that came in your box. They're going to come to you pitted and whole, just so we can chop them up to whatever size of your liking. So drop those on the board, and beside that you have your capers, which are little brined buds of a flower actually, and they have a really nice salinity, some floral elements, a little tangy. Just these two ingredients by themselves are going to give you just a ton of flavor and be really traditional. But what you kind of need, what we use here in the restaurant, is a lot of lemon. And lemon juice is great, but where you get the most flavor without adding any liquid is the zest. This is one of our favorite tools for zesting. It's a little reamer that you can find maybe in a specialty bar tool section, but it's fantastic if you have something like this to get the zest off. So the zest will come off just that yellow skin, leaving the white pith, which is where you get a little bit of that bitterness from. So you want to avoid using that. And even when you're zesting this, you see the oils kind of spritz out into the air. This is just chock full of the lemon oil, which is where all that flavor is. So this will really brighten that dish up, because the olives and capers are really salty, pretty strong flavors. So that lemon zest is really just going to brighten that up to make it tastier, more palatable all around. So just set that aside, and just to however to your liking, just give that a nice chop, run your knife through it as much or as little as you like. You can do it more as a smooth paste, or you can do it really nice and chunky. I like to make sure to get that lemon zest up really fine, to mix that up pretty thoroughly. And then the olives and capers, pretty chunky, just to get some nice tasty bites of that. And a little bit will go a long way, but paired with that cheese and that asparagus, it's really gonna make everything pop. So just a nice rough chop. Then we're gonna mix all that just into a bowl off to the side. And like I said, it's very salty as it is, so you don't need to add any extra salt. I really like to use just some fresh ground pepper, and that'll kind of make things pop a little bit more. And a splash of extra virgin olive oil, just to kind of loosen things up. And you take one of those lemons and get a little bit of that juice in there, just to get it a little to more of a sauce consistency, and that mixed with that extra virgin olive oil, or any kind of olive oil really, will mix up just to a delicious sauce and topping for the white beans and asparagus. And here we are at the next step with your flat iron. It has been resting to a room temperature, and it's been well seasoned and sitting aside while we do our other mise en place. The beans are simmering away, tapenade is made, everything else is ready to go. So next step, with a nice hot pan, might be a little too hot, a little bit of cooking oil. With a hot pan, you don't want to use olive oil or anything too flavored, because it's just going to burn that flavor away. So carefully away from you, lay that flat iron down. So in this step, you want to have a thermometer handy. We just have a probe thermometer here, a thermopen, ready to go whenever you get to the end of the cooking, just to get your temperature exactly right. Every chef has a theory of the best way to test for doneness. Some use like the palm of the hand, but I can guarantee you that it's never always accurate. So in our kitchen, Café Violette, we use a thermometer on everything, fish and steaks alike. So let's check out how it's looking. Getting some nice color. Just another minute. Might need a touch more oil. You want just enough oil to cover the bottom of the pan, just so that meat can get a good contact surface. With a steak this size, it's so thin that if you wanted rare, medium rare to medium, you can do it all on the stovetop. You don't have to go into an oven, don't have to worry about any ambient heat. You can do it all with the direct heat in a hot pan. If it is cooking a little faster and you want to get more to a medium well, you can turn that heat down a little bit, and that'll kind of buy you a little more time so the inside gets to cook a little bit longer. But if you're going for a medium rare, which is what we're going to look for today, that will, just a higher heat will give you what you need, give you that color, and cook from the outside pretty darn fast. And before you go poking it, if you're curious about the temperature on the inside, just use your thermometer. Get a nice angle so you hit right in the middle, and just check the temperature. Make sure when you're doing this, turn your hood vents on in your kitchen. If you're going to high heat like this, you're going to get some smoke, which is natural. It's just those fats from the steak and the oil. So right now, at this time, we are about rare in the thickest parts and going over towards the side about a medium rare, about 115, 120 for that medium rare, around 100, 110 for that rare side. So we'll pull that off. And an important thing for steak is you want to let it rest. So I have a clean rack here that is just going to let that steak rest, and it'll redistribute those juices, and that way you won't bleed out as much. You won't lose the moisture of those juices whenever you go to slice it. All right, the next step, we have our steak resting. The beans are finishing up. We just started the heat off on those. The next step is the asparagus, which is one of my favorite vegetables because it's great flavor, really fresh, really green, and it is super easy and fast to cook. It's really hard to mess up. You can blanch it beforehand and do all these fancy things, but you really don't have to. You want to get a pan nice and warm, medium-high heat, and then turn it down a little bit. That way the asparagus is going to hit that pan, get a nice sear on the outside, and then it's going to cook a little bit slower once it gets going. Asparagus really needs some salt and some acid, so we'll start with a little salt. And you want to keep your heat at about a medium heat so it gets a little bit of color on the outside, but it's not going to burn before the inside is done. I like the asparagus with a little bit of texture, a little bit of bite. So don't worry if it's a little bit of a bite to it. That's just gonna add some texture to the dish because the white beans are gonna be nice and creamy. The asparagus is where you're gonna get some texture. And then we have that delicious beefy flavor from the flat iron. Just kind of moved around in the pan. You'll start to see a little color, a little browning on there. Just move them around so all the sides land on that pan. A little bit of pepper, a little bit of black pepper. Black pepper can burn, so you want to be careful with adding that on things too early because that can burn, get a little bit bitter on you. This is going, it's got a little bit of color on the outside. You need a little bit of liquid to let that steam a little bit and cook some more. So for that, we're going to use the rest of that lemon that we started earlier. So we have a little bit of juice left in that one half and then that other half. So kind of cover the asparagus with that. And that steam is going to help it finish cooking. But you want to start with that higher heat without too much liquid. And that's going to get you that color. That color and the texture on the outside of the asparagus. And then as you toss it around, you'll see a little bit of brown, a little bit of color. That steam is going to set that color really nice and bright green. But you can see these, they're not floppy at all. They're just starting to bend. So they're going to have some nice texture. And just a couple minutes in the pan is really all you need for some really nice asparagus. So at this point, these are pretty much perfect. That's really all you need for some really perfectly done asparagus. A little bit of high heat, and then a little bit of steam, salt, lemon, and they are good to go. So just set those aside before they get too much heat, before they get floppy. And while these are warm, we are going to slice that steak and plate up the final plate. All right, we are at that final step. While we're cooking the asparagus, that flat iron steak has been resting. 5-10 minutes is really all you need to kind of set those juices. We are gonna cut against the grain. The flat iron is great for that because it's already cut so the grain is running lengthwise here. So just take a longer knife. Longer sharp knife is really all you need. I have a 9.5 inch slicer here, and kind of lean your knife a little bit, get a nice angle. And we're going to get pretty thin slices. So this is that side of the flat iron that is more rare. You can see that color there. For those of you that want it a little more rare, this was about 105 degrees internal temperature whenever we were getting that flat iron finished up. So there's some nice, more rare cuts here, and then as we get down into the flat iron where it gets thinner, will be a little bit more cooked. If you want both sides cooked the same, if you're dealing with thickness, kind of like this flat iron here, before you cook it, cut the flat iron where the shape changes, and that'll give you some options when you cook it to cook that one side a little bit less. But these thin slices against the grain are gonna give you that nice texture, make it really easy and pleasant to eat. So we got our steak sliced. Let's plate this plate up. We got our beans here that have been simmering, nice and creamy, really simply flavored with that salt and bay leaf. That's really all you need. So just get those, just a nice little pile. This kind of cuisine The French Mediterranean is simple, flavorful. The plating here is going to be pretty straightforward, nothing too fancy, but the colors are just really going to pop. So grab your portion of your flat iron, lay that down for a little bit of height, fan it out a little bit. Grab your portion of your still warm asparagus. Gonna lay that across. When you're plating, you're just looking for a little bit of height. Keep things kind of tight to the middle, stack it up a little bit. All the tricks that we use in the restaurant are pretty darn easy to mimic at home. You're just looking for a little bit of height, color. So here's that delicious tapenade, just go right on top. So whenever you go for a bite, you're gonna get a little bit of everything. A little bit of all those flavors all in one bite. Another trick we have at the restaurant, some nice plating tweezers. Just lay those, and as that cheese hits the warm beans, the warm asparagus, it's going to soften up a little bit, and that is your finished plate. And if you do local pickup here at the restaurant, one of the benefits we are offering is a specific paired wine with this dish, chosen by our in-house sommelier, Sunshine. So this wine with this dish is a Florida Chardonnay from the Savoie region in France. It is an unoaked Chardonnay, specifically from the AOP of Bouget. Some notes of brown butter and apple. If you're looking for a different wine to pair with this dish, we'd recommend something similar, French Chardonnay, Burgundy or Savoie, something with less oak than some Chardonnays that'll kind of pair with the notes of the dish. So that's one of the benefits, again, of the local pickup, and we can pair this wine for you.